was actually the Manitoba government. The Manitoba, where we live right here, have actually proposed some changes to the pre-election blackout rules, trying to sneak that in, but hopefully no one was noticed. Thankfully, we've got an NDP party, for those of you in the UK, that's similar to the Labour Party, who are standing up and stopping that going through and being, which is kind of good. But what this actually means is we've got our fixed elections, and we've had fixed elections here in Manitoba since 2008, and they've actually, and so there are some fixed blackouts rules there that you can't then start promoting yourself as a politician, and it prevents the government from having an unfair advantage in the election. So before this, there was a 90-day blackout, and the Manitoba government want to change that to 60 days. So, what do you reckon, Ryan?
Well, I think that's just exactly the kind of thing that you would try and sneak in when everybody's busy and preoccupied with other things. It doesn't even have to be a massive healthcare crisis. We see governments trying to sneak in capricious legislation all the time. It could be anything, anytime, anywhere. As long as they got you looking this way, they'll try and just sneak something in.
That is often the case.
So, and the whole point of us having multiple parties and legislations is so that people can't abuse that situation. Now, advertising sooner than later, I don't know. I feel like there's a part of me that's upset, and so automatically I want to say that it's bad. But then I wonder, does this actually hurt you in the long run, or could this actually backfire on you by advertising earlier, if you're allowed to advertise earlier?
Well, it's not a matter of you're allowed to advertise earlier. This is something to limit the power of government. Of course, you can push your political party all the time. There's nothing stopping you as a regular citizen running for office. The 60-day blackout is so that you cannot act as an MP or a member of the legislature, and from your official position in government, just a campaign from there. It's a ridiculous, unfair. It is an unfair advantage.
All right. Yeah. So I think that's where my misconceptions are coming in. Yeah, that does lead it up to an abuse of sort of a privileged position. Yeah, that just seems like it's a very bad idea.
Yeah. Well, particularly when it was before the last election. We had election, was it 2019?
Yeah,
at the end of 2019, and the Progressive Conservatives got in for a second term. And while they were trying to get in for the second term, they were desperate to get the waiting times for the emergency rooms numbers out. And I think that's probably a big push where they shut down 2 of 5 or 3 of 6 emergency rooms, which is great. We're really enjoying that now with the armed guards in hospitals because everyone's desperate to try and get in. So they wanted to get that out so they could say that, well, the numbers of people waiting in the emergency rooms have gone down. The reality is that they've renamed some of the emergency rooms and taken away some of the equipment and called them urgent care. So that's number fixing. And yeah, the numbers have gone right down because there's nowhere to go. Anyhow, so it's that kind of thing which you could, we'll probably be another year or two before we see any real numbers or any real statistics there. But you can spin out those numbers just like I did. To make them look bad. They can spin those to make themselves look good.
Anytime you have a percentage, you got to be careful when someone starts talking percentages, because percentages are easily, they sound impressive. So for instance, I'm going to pick on photo radar here stuff because it's so easy. This is a blatant abuse of this idea of what percentages can represent. We're justified in putting a camera at a corner of pick your street here because there was a series of deadly T-bone collisions at that area that cost either people were seriously injured or hurt. And that constitutes a number. And now that we've put the camera in there, those numbers have dropped 100%. Well, if you don't have a time scale on how frequently that happens and how frequently that kind of accident happens and what kind of injuries, and if you don't have all the details, that sounds like it's really effective. You reduced deadly T-bone crashes by 100%. Well, if you only had one every 10 years, and you're in year 6, you haven't done anything. It's just a statistical aberration.
Actually, it kind of reminds me of was it the last U.S. election? Was I think it was last year's election, but Jeb Bush was saying, "Oh yeah, I know my brother. There's not been any attacks on the U.S. since my. Oh no, he secured us, made us more secure. But yeah, 9/11 happened on your brother's watch. Like you just the way you're spinning it. Anyway, it's kind of sounds something like that, right? Yeah, but the first part of the first 6 months of your term was pretty awful.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing's happened since.
So and those numbers can be easily manipulated by either side, right? Exactly. You could say that. I mean, we're easily picking on the government because that's what governments do. They put themselves on the chair, so that puts a big bullseye on their back. But opposition can really abuse those as well and present something that is completely untrue. Yeah. So the truth is, if your government puts out numbers and then your opposition puts out numbers, you kind of have to play statistician and look at those numbers and say, well, it's probably somewhere in between, right? And it's and all of them are full of half truths and this and that. So you kind of have to sift through. But I don't know. I love this kind of stuff, but there's times when I read through stuff like that, and I just sit there like. And just want to give up because it's all just thrown out there, and it's just meant to look everybody look bad. Yeah.
That's actually. So there was a phrase. Just something that I guess I see Steve's name in the list there, which just reminded me, cast my mind back to when we were teenagers. There was something we used to say, and we'd just say it because it was funny. It was not because we were making a point, but. That's as look. You see that was as fast as greased squirrel shit. You say I didn't say anything. That's because it was that fast, right? Or words to that effect, right? It's you can make arguments. Sometimes you can flaw them immediately, and sometimes you just laugh at them. Anyhow, So I think that these things are. I think you had asked a question earlier there, Ryan. Was is this likely to backfire or come back and bite you? Well, this kind of thing it already has, right? When you try and change when you're in power and you try and change the elections to benefit you when you're currently in power, incredibly short-sighted. It was Franklin D. Roosevelt. Actually, it was in his second term, and the Republicans. And when was this? I forget I didn't write the year down.
It's right around the Second World War, right about the time.
So there was a whole load of reforms and the New Deal and everything else, and because people loved him because they took him, he took the people out of this slump but the Great Depression in the 1930s, and of course people loved him and they wanted to keep voting. So he'd actually got a second term and a third term, and they're like, hang on a minute. He ended up actually getting a fourth term as well. And so the Republicans pushed through this legislation to limit terms to 2 terms. Now, the funny thing was, I remember this, it would have been 90s, I guess, was late 80s, early 90s, was Ronald Reagan was really, really, really popular. And the Republicans were all beside themselves because they could have had they believed they had a third term coming with Ronald Reagan. And it's... really, we did this actually offline. What was it on Saturday? You and I were talking about this, Ryan. And there has been no instance of a party who's had 2 terms who have, with a new president, have gone on and taken a third term as a party. Right? It hasn't been since. So it's really bitten them up the bottom. So yeah, these things can really hurt you. Now the laugh is, I mean, this is a bit of a sidebar. I think in Russia. Laws have changed so Vladimir Putin can take on another term, right? So that he can squeeze that in. Now there's uproar, right? Because the US has 2-term limit. No other, as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, there is no other Western democratic system that has a term limit on their leaders. In Canada, the Prime Minister can be Prime Minister as long as he can get voted in. Same in the UK, same in, I believe, in all of Europe as well. So it's kind of ridiculous that they're arguing about that. But when you try and restrict it,
I think the only restrictions, and I didn't dig deep into this because it didn't seem like it was. It just seemed pretty clear that they're. Whoa, shoot! I lost my train of thought. No, yeah, okay, it's back. They might have like term limits in terms of like, okay, from A to B, you can only govern for 5 years. In Canada, it's 4 years it's now 4 years. It used to be 4 years with the option to go to 5, and then you have to call it in year 5. Most places have some kind of operation like that. Yeah. But for instance, if you are the prime minister in your first term, and your term expires, you can become prime minister again, and then you can go for a third and a fourth. That's how we had like 15 years worth of Jean Chrétien. So he just kept getting elected. So it didn't really matter. So and that's perfectly legal. Yeah, the U.S. is like the only person. Comment from Shalene. Reagan had 2 terms. The term for
Bush the first had 1. Yeah. So if we misspoke, I was talking about Reagan, or at least I meant to that Reagan. They wanted to give a third term.
Yeah, they wanted to give a third term to Reagan, but then they realized that the man was senile.
No, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it because they changed the Constitution.
Yeah, that's right. So they'd have to actually go in there. But I mean, I think they were smart enough to realize that no, that's not good. We probably shouldn't have him run. So yeah, they had no choice but to put Bush in, and Bush the first got there. But he did not, interestingly, get a second term. Bush the second did, and I don't know if we're all better off for that. So definitely not.
Well, I don't think but the point, actually, my point certainly wasn't arguing one way or the other. Yeah. My point was, if you make legislation to benefit you while you're in power, it's going to bite you in the backside and give way, because you're not going to be in power for very long. I mean, even NDP, we had one for 17 years. I mean, that's a long time, but they stopped being in power, and now we got the Progressive Conservatives in Manitoba. You're not going to be in power forever, and now you're giving an advantage to the other guy. It just seems to be ridiculous. So it's a ridiculous place to put yourself in such a disadvantage. It wasn't that funny, Ryan.
No, it wasn't. Apparently, I can't handle my Diet Coke this evening.
This is the back door to the Manitoba legislature. Now, if you hit the subscribe button now, hit the notification bell, then you won't be surprised when they try to stick something up your back door.